Happy 4th of July, everybody, and there's no better way to celebrate than a quick review of Young Washington, a film about George Washington that me and my dad saw very recently, and we look forward to review. And to begin, I just want to start off by saying it was a great film. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed every part of it. I really don't understand this online reaction I'm seeing, at least on Letterboxd and even Rotten Tomatoes, where at the highest it's getting like 50%. So to me, that doesn't make sense. Before I really get into it, I'd be curious to know, Dad, what do you think of the film?
I agree with you, Jacob. I thought this was an excellent movie, and I would also give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think it was excellent on every metric that you would look at to evaluate this movie. First of all, let's just look at it as a film unto itself. I thought that the set design, the scenery, the cinematography was excellent. I thought William Franklin Miller as Washington did a great job carrying the movie. There were great character actors in the film: Ben Kingsley, Kelsey Grammer, Mary Louis Parker. Is that her name from
Yeah.
Weeds? So it was a very well casted movie, a very well acted movie. The action sequences, of which there were many, I thought was excellent. And what I loved about this movie is, first of all, I'm very familiar with George Washington. I've read many books about him. I've read many books about the American Revolution. And this film is historically accurate. And where it deviates from the history to enhance the story, it does so in a very respectful and logical way. It's unabashedly patriotic, but at the same time, the director, John Irwin, never sacrifices quality filmmaking in support of his patriotism. So I'm in complete agreement with you. I really enjoyed this movie. And I think it's important to note that when you and I saw it, Jacob, the theater was almost filled. People applauded at the end. And I think this is the exact type of movie that you could go to with anyone in your family, because even with the violence, it's not the type of violence that would be frightening to children. I think it gives people a great appreciation for Washington, and it was an incredibly enjoyable, well made film.
And something I really enjoyed about the film, in addition to what you added, is the narrative and when it takes place. It says Young Washington. None of this is happening during the American Revolution. Every single scene occurs before the United States of America even exists. And you mentioned that you're very well versed in Washington history. My knowledge of George Washington really only carries to say U.S. history in high school. So, of course, maybe we briefly touch upon his experience with being a major under the British, but I really did not know all this information about the Battle of Fort Duquesne, the Battle of Fort Necessity. So, I can at least say from the novice perspective, it was really refreshing to see this type of narrative of George Washington. One I'm not very familiar with. Everybody, of course, knows that the founding father of our country is the first president, but not many people know that he had this side of his history, especially when he was so young. I believe they said he was 21, already a major, already having some type of service and being able to lead men in his militia. So I really, surprisingly, even though it may sound ironic that I liked seeing Washington wearing the red coat, I thought that was a really great and interesting way to do a movie on Washington because I'm sure, history is replete with films of his experience as a Revolutionary War officer and as a president. But I'd have to think that there's less films about his experience under the British, and I think they chose a great subject matter to
I
pursue.
completely agree with you. I think that's an excellent point, because people who are not familiar with Washington and they sort of view him as the father of the country with the gray hair and the closed mouth grin. Washington had an incredibly exciting youth. He had to deal with the early death of his father. He had to deal with these aspirations for greatness. But because he was a colonist, he was constantly reminded that even when he served in the British military, it wasn't as a British officer, it was as a Virginian as an officer. So this film explores Washington's ambitious side, which was very much the case with him. It explores his obsession with getting treated with respect and proper rank, very historically accurate. I think it does a lovely job exploring the early love interest of his life, which most people may not be aware of, which was not Martha, but Sally Fairfax. So you make a great point. For people who don't know Washington, he was a legitimate badass who was involved at the seminal moment of the French, and some would argue caused the French and Indian War. It also shows the tremendous arc of how Washington had to come back from setbacks and failures and really make himself into the great man that he was. So I think your point is very well
And I'd
taken.
want to say what it also does a great job is Washington exists in this mythos of American civilization. But this film really shows it. What I'm speaking of is like the fact that it seems like God is on his side. There's bullets that whiz by him. You see bullets go through his jacket, go through his hat. I later looked up that this is actually historically accurate. So I can already sense that when the TikTok edits come, he has he's a lot of aura. And they did a really good job showing that. And it was just cool. Even like the historical accurate stuff's great and I appreciate that. But you don't get bogged down in the history. They do a great job with the battle scenes. The visuals are excellent. I know that they use some AI. I typically don't like that, but I imagine it was very few, and I wouldn't let that prevent anybody from going to the theater. So I thought they also did a great job just showing him to be a really cool, badass figure.
Absolutely. And for myself, obviously I'm older than you, Jacob. I remember the first, well, not the first, but I remember our bicentennial. Today we're celebrating our biquincentennial. And, patriotism was, I think, a much more embedded part of American culture than perhaps it is today. But there's so much to admire about Washington the man, and so much of an appreciation that we have for what he did in helping, found this country, that the filmmakers, the producers, and the director Irwin, you make a very good point. They picked the perfect part of his life. It really, by the way, hopefully sets up sequels, because the second
Hopefully.
part would be what Washington did as a general in the Revolutionary War, and then of course as president. But beyond that, the historically accurate part of Washington is almost unbelievable.
Fictional.
Even the part
Yeah.
where he's a surveyor and goes on the adventure and is saved by walking across the frozen ice. All of this is true. So you really do get the film imbued with that providential selection of Washington,
Right.
which is true. And as I said, I thought that Franklin did a phenomenal job as the main actor. I really do. I mean, he was a compelling, charismatic screen presence, but he also did a good job conveying his inner turmoil. Yet he was very likable. And
And then, sorry.
yeah, no, no,
And then
please.
I just want to say another theme that I appreciate that touched upon is kind of the founding of America, or at least what it's supposed to be about, where you don't need to have established wealth. You don't have to be in the established gentility to make a name for yourself. There was this phrase throughout the movie, any pawn can capture a king. And even though Washington was, of course, had a lot of land, he didn't have this established name. He was a colonialist. He wasn't from England. And it did a really good job of setting up these themes even before the foundation of America and just felt really patriotic when you're watching it, at least in our case, the day right before July 4th.
Yes. And of course, July 3rd is a historically significant date because it's the date when Fort Necessity fell, which was a tremendous quote unquote failure for Washington. And yet it served as the learning experience, the launching pad for immense success. So it's a film that I would highly recommend people go to for a multitude of reasons. If you like great stories that are compelling and entertaining, you'll enjoy it. Take your children. If you're somewhat of a history buff, but are not that familiar with Washington, this film will do it. And I want to repeat again, the scenery, the settings, the cinematography, they really make you appreciate the beauty of the Alleghenies and of Virginia and how colonial people lived. Everything was extremely well done. And this movie was a true pleasure.
All right. Well, that's as strong of an endorsement that I could make myself. So I really hope our viewers watching go and see the movie if they have not already. And I look forward to seeing you in the comments and hopefully watching the video yourselves. Thank you.